Hello, my name is TJ Kennedy, and we're here for the Fractional Source podcast. Today, I'm here with Ramit James, and we're going to be having an interesting story talking about some new tools and capabilities that can help you facilitate better conversations and better outcomes. With that, I want to introduce my first guest, Ramit. Do you want to take a little bit of time, talk about you and your background, and then a little bit about Breakout as well?
Sure. Thanks, TJ. My name is Ramit Varma. I started a company in the education technology space in 2002. So my long background's in electrical engineering and consulting, but the bulk of my career was in one-on-one and small group instruction. We used to prepare students for various standardized tests. So we have a really deep understanding of pedagogy. Sold that business in 2021. And as AI started entering the mainstream, wanted to think about the best ways to use it. And candidly, a lot of what we felt were the things that I was reading about in the press were fairly simplistic implementations of AI, things like bots and agents, okay, which are very, very powerful tools, but are sort of simplistic tools. And what we had learned at Revolution Prep, my last company, was that discussions, small group discussions are really the core of any kind of learning, any kind of communication. It's not surprising. We've been learning this way as a species for thousands of years, right? Like since we've been sitting around campfires and trading stories, this is how we have learned as a species. The way that we do it in educational environments, even in corporate L&D environments, the way that we communicate has been fundamentally based on the tools that we've had for the last 100 years. AI changes that. And I think in our mind allows us to get much more human, much more relationship oriented, much more conversational with our communication. And that has been proven time and again to be the most impactful medium for education, for communication.
That's awesome. That's awesome to hear that AI augments those aspects, right? Because you hear a lot of folks on the other side say that it's actually robbing us of that ability. And I would tend to agree with you that I think it's actually helping us get to the point.
Absolutely. I think, like with any technology, the use case has to match the tool, right? And I think in our case, what we look at is say, all right, well, take tutoring, for example, right? I hear all the time, oh, I created this bot and I can train it on the Socratic method, and that tutor bot is going to be better than a human tutor. That's just not true. That represents a misunderstanding of what the purpose of a tutor is in a relationship. The tutor is there to motivate that student to learn, primarily. Secondarily, to deliver whatever content, okay? Now, the challenge is, if you sort of really zoom out, you take a look at the people who are building these tools, okay? These are like top 5%, top 2% type of people. They're the people who did really well in school and then went to college, and then did really well in college and went to graduate school, and then did really well in graduate school and got a job at Google, okay? And if that's you imagine in everybody's life. And you say, well, shoot, if I had one of these bots, I could have gotten through high school, I could have learned calculus in 6 weeks instead of in a year, right? That's not who we're talking about. I mean, we're looking at what's the middle of that bell curve, okay? How do we reach those people? And those people are really getting left behind, and they're like, I don't care how good your bot is, because I don't care about the calculus you're teaching me. A great teacher learns how to inspire, not how to explain. Okay, and that's a really, really important point. Education is about inspiration. It's not about explanation. And by the way, guess what? Leadership is about inspiration. It's not about explanation. Okay, you talk to any CEO and say, how are you going to get the results out of your organization? Is it because you know how to tell them what to do? You have the clearest mechanism for telling them the list of actions that they need to take? Or is it that you can inspire them to see your vision and articulate your vision so that they can operate based on the core principles instead of operating based on a set of tasks that have come out of some higher power? Hey, that's the big idea here, right? And if you use AI properly, in our mind, then what you're doing is you're using AI to turbocharge that connectivity, that connection between humans. And that's what its best use is.
Well, you talked about that point too, where for a professor, for an instructor of any sort, a teacher, a mentor, it's really about finding what inspires the people that you're working with, you're teaching, you're partaking with. And one of the things I think you've been doing some research on is just what is the right size for that conversation? And then two, if you use AI to kind of distill that conversation prior to a typical lecture, prior to a typical education session, can that professor, that leader of that conversation, get that information ahead of time to know what inspires James, what inspires Ramit, what inspires TJ? Because we all learn differently. I think that's one of the hard things too. We often have people who, maybe in undergrad or in high school were not good at learning because, whatever they were being taught or the way they were being taught wasn't how they learned information. I'm more of a visual person myself. I know that about me. So if somebody were just to talk to me all day, that might not be enough, right? I want to see it. I want to understand it. I want to get the big picture. And so, what have you learned through your trials and use of technology here is working, and why is it working?
Yeah, it's a great question, TJ. So for us, there's a very clear optimal group size, and that is 4 to 6. Okay, and there's a reason for it. Okay, if you get above 6, it meaningfully reduces the expectation that you will participate in that conversation. Okay, and if you get below 3, or 3 or lower, if you're below 4, then your group is almost like too small. You're not going to quite get the energy that you need to have a really free flowing set of ideas. One person might say something, if the other two disagree, that'll shut down conversation. So 4 to 6 is the ideal group size. And there's 2 different ways that our technology is used. So just as a brief diversion, so the way that our technology works is it looks a lot like a Google Meet or a Zoom or any sort of video conferencing platform. There are 2-way videos. There's a shared sort of almost like a slide deck. Okay, the slide deck tees up a discussion, and participants get involved in those discussions. Now, there are 2 questions, and this is all purpose driven. In some cases, I'm trying to teach those students something. I might have some pre-work for them. Now, historically, pre-work looks like I'm going to give you a bunch of reading. I'm going to ask you to watch a video. I might ask you to answer some questions or do a write-up to demonstrate to me that you had watched that video or read that information. You see that in academic settings. You don't see it as much in corporate settings. I always joke whenever I give a demo, I say, well, I sent you a 30-page PDF, which tells you everything you need to know about breakout learning. If you read it, we're going to be ready for a really good conversation, right? And it's laughable that anyone would do that, right? But that's literally how we teach our students. So those people you're talking about that got left behind because they didn't connect, I think it's for most of those people, it's that they didn't connect with the mechanism of learning that we have chosen, which is 30 pages of prose, right? Again, the top 5% of people have no trouble with that. The bulk of people are not learning that way. So we would take AI and summarize that 30 pages of information to give you some bullet points. And then what we do is we create a scenario for the participants to engage with, okay? And this is another big departure from historical norms. Historically, in order to do assessment, you need right and wrong answers. Okay, so if I ask you 10 questions and you got 8 of them correct, then I can unambiguously say you got 80%, and I can translate that into a grade. Okay, everything historically has been focused on the right and the wrong answer. Okay, what we look at is something that's very different from that. We say we don't want a right or wrong answer. I want to put you into a complex scenario that doesn't have a right or wrong answer and see how you support it. I want to say, what do you think? Why do you think that? Support your answer. And because we're using AI, we can measure and evaluate how well you come up with new ideas, how well you support your point of view, how well you build on your colleagues' ideas, how well you engage in the discourse. All of that stuff comes and is evaluated by the AI. That is a exponentially better learning experience and exponentially better communication experience than you would see from anything in the past. So if you look at it when you're talking about let's say you have a group of 100 people and you want to get an understanding, you want to get their feedback on your strategy, right? Either before or after you go for that executive level strategy session, okay? Well, you can put them in groups of 5, pose the question for them. Say, here's what we're looking at, okay? We all know last year we grew at 6%. The next year we're looking to grow at 10%. These are 2 or 3 of the different ways that we're thinking about growing. What do you think about that? Give me some reasons why this will work and why this won't work. And I'll tell you what, people have opinions, man, and they don't stop. And so they go and they're, well, why do you think this? And no, we should cut bait on, Iowa because they did this, or North Carolina did that, and everyone's kind of having their conversation. We can then take that across all those groups, aggregate it, and feed it to the executives to say, all right, here's what people are thinking, and here's what you can do with it. Alternatively, if you've had that conversation already and you want to take that messaging and push it out to your employees, you can do it similarly. their pre-work would be the output from your meeting. And then that pre-work ends up being their input. And then in groups of 5, you can ask them questions based on, here's the strategy that we've laid out. Here are some of the pitfalls that we see. What do you think? That question, what do you think? Maybe one of the most powerful questions in any language, certainly the English one, right? What do you think? When you say that, I'm telling somebody, I care about what you have to say. You have something valuable to say. You're going to be heard, right? These are things that are like fundamentally important to us as people. And we just, again, given the tool set, we haven't been able to let people feel that level of responsibility, ownership, engagement. And I think tools like ours allow that to be front and center.
Yeah, it's a powerful facilitation. In in the environment professionally, that question is not asked often enough, right? And I just watched TJ facilitate a conversation around feedback last week, which I think was pretty powerful because people don't think about the feedback loop between managers, their peers, managing up, managing down. And when you have that semaphore, right, from an objective tool, which in this case is AI, I think sussing out a lot of that feedback is really important. It helps you make decisions and do it with more confidence, right? And so
That's right.
we pivot away from the academic and get explicitly within the professional arena. So let's start with enterprise. I know you guys are working on potential enterprise applications and thinking about what that evolution of this service looks like. I don't think there's a one-for-one between academia and obviously in corporate enterprise. There's certainly a lot of flow through that a lot of parallels that you can see. What are some of the strongest parallels that you're seeing that you can capitalize on using this tool for companies? And we can get to public sector too. It's up to you where you want to go next, but I think you know where I'm headed.
Yeah, I think that's right. Look, I think it's the core engine of what we do, which is to facilitate these discussions and then sort of aggregate feedback across them, is directly applicable from the educational setting into a corporate setting. Some of the folks we've been talking to and we are looking at doing right now is directly in corporate L&D. So they're saying, look, Ramit, I have a library of courseware. I have a sexual harassment training. People need to sit through it for 2 hours. They watch a video, they answer some questions. People aren't paying attention, click their way through. Could we do something where you pose some scenarios that are really like more interesting scenarios and have people talk it over? And that would, substitute for the training. So we can take any existing library of content and convert it into an AI ready type of content. So basically call it didactic content, right? One-way directional content, and turn it into scenario-driven content that is evaluated using an AI tool. We can do that for small groups. We also have the capability to do it with asynchronously. A participant can interact with a bot. We have a voice-driven bot that actually converses with them. That's not our ideal use format. It's a good backup plan for people who just for whatever reason can't coordinate the time. But the surprising additional benefits of people having these conversations is that they're talking to their peers, they're talking to their colleagues, they're building community, which is something that people are more and more desperate for as we've gotten into more and more of a virtual world. What we've observed, our company is fully virtual as well, and it creates a level of stress because every interaction is a purposeful interaction. And I say that because it's really interesting if you think about it. Of course you want to have purposeful interactions, but if all of your interactions are goal-oriented and with an agenda and this, and there's no just shooting the breeze and just talking about what happened in your lives and this, you don't end up without the connective tissue that allows you to handle when the stress load increases. And so that's just sort of an ancillary benefit of doing these conversations. So that's one. I think a second one, which is really powerful, is if you buy into this idea that the fidelity of the information, the fidelity of the signal decreases as you go from the center of the organization to the edges of the organization. Okay. I'm a CEO. I give my signal. It's a game of telephone. By the time I get to the edges of my 200 person or my 800 person or my 3,000 person organization, they don't know me. I don't have a personal relationship with them. They saw me on a town hall, which The people decided we're going to do using Zoom's feature, which only shows my face, right? It doesn't show the other participants. It's like, it's all of a sudden you're further and further into this isolated world. Like, look at visually what we're doing, right? I've turned people into a 2 inch by 2 inch square on a black background with maybe a PowerPoint slide behind them. Okay, uh, that's not going to make people happy, right? Just like that's humanly, that's not going to make people happy. So what we accept is that if that's the case, well, why don't we flip that model on its head? Instead of a broadcast mentality, let's have a true town hall mentality. Everybody's talking in small groups, and then we aggregate our way back to the center. Okay, and that works if you're pushing information out because you can design the conversations that they're having, and it works if you're pushing information in because you can ask the questions in a way that brings the information back. We're all familiar with pulse surveys, right? We're all familiar with employee engagement surveys. Tell me on a scale from 0 to 5 how much the company cares about you as an individual. Okay, people don't like to answer these questions. They'll put a 5, right? James puts 5 because last time he had trouble and he needed to take a couple of days off, his boss was really cool with him. Okay, and TJ gives it a 1 because last time he had to take time off, his boss was a jerk about it. Okay, so you're going to get 2 really different signals from actually the exact same quote unquote issue without any texture or understanding why. But if you guys were in a conversation, you'd be like, well, I don't know. I had a great experience. And you'd be like, I had an absolutely horrible experience. And we're capturing all that. We're collecting all that and aggregating. And so you get the dual benefit of getting people involved and feeling part of change and part of the conversation. And then you get the information. And what it really does is if you do need to execute any kind of change, it massively shortcuts your timeline from getting people on board because they've already thought about these things because you've told them what they're thinking.
Well, I think your point too about having those 1 to 5, 3 to 4 kind of person discussions where people can talk through it and you can hear and absorb the context conversations, whether they're good or bad, or they're just more context, and then using AI to take that context to give you more flavor allows you to have a more meaningful, all hands, right? I mean, if you could send out an update on an asynchronous video of a strategy document, to your point, whether it's in a government agency, it's in a corporation, and say, here's where we're headed, here's why we're headed there. I want you all to go off and meet in groups of 5, and we select those groups, so we purposely mix it up, and it's different groups of people that we want to see get together, and then have them meet and discuss it, and then absorb that feedback before we have another all hands or another get together, even an in-person discussion. Now you have the richness of all those side conversations coming together with some fortitude into what you're going to decide or do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we see it, I mean, we just, we do some, we're talking with some defense agencies to do some work for them on some training. And Secretary Hegseth just came out with this whole big speech about, acquisitions and how, like, he's laid out the vision for what, government acquisition, DoD acquisition needs to look like. The connectivity between the design of the strategy and the execution of the strategy is a problem that we've been trying to solve for a long time. Okay, and we've been as effective as we can be in the context of the tool set we have. But this tool set collapses the distance between the strategy and the executors, and you'll be able to hear directly and straight up all the reasons why the strategy won't work or why people love it, right? Or where are the potholes, right? Or what are people's attitudes, right? And it's different from there's a lot of stuff out there that does sentiment analysis on emails, and I want to identify when an employee is unhappy because they're using certain language in their emails and that kind of stuff. I mean, that's got a very specific purpose, right? But this idea of structured conversations that are structured and thoughtfully designed in a certain way, really, in our mind, allows you to very quickly and very rapidly iterate on getting the change that you want out to the edges of the organization.
It's funny because I keep thinking about the term you use, this broadcast mentality, right? Organizations are inherently messy, right? It's boxes and sticks and a bunch of different opinions. And the executive that leans into broadcast mentality is trying to exert control on their message and protect the message to the outermost fringe of the organization. You're absolutely right. by the time it gets to the outermost fringe, it's diminishing returns, it's game of telephone, whatever you want to call it. And what you're missing is trade-offs. And our natural inclination is to have a discussion with our peers, with our staff, and essentially negotiate to an outcome, right? Because not every direction is going to be met cleanly with a yes sir, yes ma'am kind of approach. And in fact, it probably shouldn't be, because there probably should be some discussion, especially when we're talking about strategy and connecting execution to strategy, like you just said, is really hard. And it's because we don't invest in the trade-off or our inherent need as people to be a part of a decision, not to be told what to do, but to contribute to the outcome overall. And some of that is taking direction, right? But some of it all is also creating that opportunity for feedback, and seeing yourself as being accretive to the organization is really important. And I think one of the biggest missing pieces since COVID, obviously, is the direct interaction, which those of us try, right? Most of us who get on site with an organization and do the FaceTime and do the hard work, we're trying, but there's still 60%, 70% of the population that feels that they shouldn't have to go back to the office and engage at that level. That's fine, because we have the tools now, right? We should, there's no excuse. There's really nowhere to hide. There's no reason to say you can't communicate with your team. So when I think about the tool that you're bringing, Ramit, like this idea that you can platform that trade-off in small groups and then aggregate, to me, that takes a lot of that messiness of the organization. Instead of trying to solve the messiness, you acknowledge it, you lean into it. It's a fact of life. How do we capitalize on the noise that comes out of it? I think it's a really powerful tool for us.
Yeah, I mean, James, I think you hit it right on its head. Like, the idea is, are these dogs going to be a problem for this?
No, it's okay. It's like having a laugh track.
There's somebody in the driveway and these guys just freak out.
That's okay.
The idea is buy-in, right? Like if you were to poll or ask hundreds of CEOs and communications people and human resource people, what do you really want from your employees? You want buy-in, right? And how do you get buy-in? It's just not through an email or through a video that you send. Like there's a believability gap in some cases. There's an information gap in some places. There's a do I really care about what people are? Do they care about me gap, right? And all those gaps disappear if you can get people into a rhythm of having conversations. And the beauty of these kinds of conversations is because they're not directly about their specific goals at work in a given moment, right? They're not operational in nature. It lets people gives them a space to just sort of sit back and just talk and be thoughtful and to think about the company as a whole, which is really what you want them to be doing.
Well, I think the key too is just letting people, one, have that conversation, two, share what they have, three, they know they're being listened to, and then four, try to turn it into something productive, right? Which is productively get us behind a strategy, productively get us to go execute, get us to work as one team, all those kind of core things that we're trying to do, and to do it more quickly. I mean, I think the biggest thing going into 2026 for agencies, for companies, is how do we build velocity? On the development side, we're seeing it happen in coding, that's happening much faster. But I think a lot of the rest of companies are kind of being left behind a little bit, where their velocity is still circa 2020, and the velocity on the development and technology side is circa 2026 coming up. And how do we build that velocity for change management?
Yeah, absolutely. And this idea of in the past, again, conceptually, to engage 200 or 400 people into a conversation is like months of preparation and, hundreds of hours. And it's just like, it just doesn't scale. It's just virtually impossible, right? And this idea of being able to scale small group discussions, that's the real heart of it, right? Is that, you can, as an input to your meeting with senior leadership, get feedback from 400 people. And you can do it in 1 hour, okay? Because you tell everybody this is the time. We're gonna distribute into groups. You can distribute by seniority level, by geography, by functional area, by kids, no kids. I mean, whatever question you guys you distribute, however you choose. And at 4 p.m. or 2 p.m. on Tuesday, everybody drops into their session. They have their conversation, and by 3:30 p.m., you've got a report that tells you what people have been saying and how they're thinking about it, what their ideas are, where are your potholes, and you use that as an input to your executive level conversation. it's actually stunning. And when we do it, this is the thing we do at universities, right? Like these are classes of 650 students. Okay. In the past, and I've seen, like, I show you these lecture halls. I mean, it's almost like stadium style lecture halls. And in the past, it was very one directional. It was very broadcast, right, James? Like, what can I do but come in here and talk out loud to 650 people, right? And now that those professors are like, oh, well, I know what you guys got and I know what you didn't get. And so I'm going to just focus on the stuff that you didn't get. And I'm going to let you do a couple more in-class activities because I don't have to spend 70% of the time going over the stuff that you already know, right? And that's the thing that's also really interesting is that when you can start getting an understanding of what you need to sell them on, sell them. What you need to convince your team of and what you don't have to, you can iterate your messaging, right? So if you have a corporate, sort of strategic vision and you're like, this is the vision that we're going to be diving into, if you comes back to you that like two of your three points, like everybody's bought in, they love it. All of the conversation was about point three, and that's where the real discussion and the dispute and the discourse was. Great. What were they saying? And what are the questions that I need to answer so that they're on board with that, right? Think about how important and powerful that information is.
Absolutely. My first class, my freshman year in college, was 1,200 people in a theater. I mean, it's like I got nothing out of it. And guess what? I bet the professor got nothing, or the professors and the many TAs that were facilitating that class got nothing out of it as well, right? So I think about that a lot, especially after we first spoke, because I can actually draw parallels to every job I've had after that, and all the meetings that were supposed to be the most important meetings had too many people. It's like we don't need this many cooks. There's a whole idiom behind it. So, and I think as we, TJ and I spend a lot of time around public sector organizations. Obviously, he and I both have a federal background. I've got state and local as well. You do too, as well, TJ, from a public safety perspective. But when we get to the more core public safety or public sector policy agencies, like those agencies that actually distribute directives to the state or local communities on how to do business with taxpayers, essentially providing services, whatever it is. This group is incredibly passive aggressive, right? There's not a lot of incentive to engage. And I bet you if you talk to any city manager, county manager, chief of staff to a governor and said, this is the tool. You don't have to do the all hands thing. You can actually boil this down to policy direction, right? Actually policy discussions that are often very messy. It would sell itself in a heartbeat because the return on being able to get to a decision without anybody feeling like they're going to a decision, right? That's the thing you're trying to really avoid, is to make people think they're walking a plank. I think it's really awesome. And I would bet that the application, again, from education to corporate environment to the public sector environment, it's the same through line all the way through, because the commonality is that we're all people and we're all coming from that. I think you talked about it the first time we spoke, sitting around a fire, right?
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to solve. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about if you guys are thinking about getting into public sector at all, if you looked at that as a potential market. But I think the application is pretty obvious.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, there's a lot of public sector applications. I mean, from what you just described all the way out to doing town halls for, a congressman. If you look at a congressman doing a town hall, constituents often look at that as an opportunity to just get up and scream at their congressman, right? It's not intended as a discussion. It's just intended as a bloodbath in some ways. And so a lot of people just stop doing them, right? And I can see being a city manager, I can see being a county manager saying, all right, I have some information. I got some decisions that I have to make. I have to get buy-in. How do I do it? This is something that's fairly dead center to what we do. So I can give you an example. There's an airport in Florida, large international airport, that's looking at doing an entertainment district on their property. So they engaged with one of our university clients to do a research project for them. These are 200 business owners and people who are stakeholders that we want to get their feedback on a variety of these questions. Can you help us with that? Well, that university professor, who is a teacher, is also a researcher. He said, hey, can I use your platform to do this research? Absolutely, no problem. And so there we go. We bring in the owner of these local restaurants, the local parking lots and whatever, and we ask them a series of questions. They get to meet the other stakeholders in their community, everyone's talking, and then we aggregate that information, feed it back to the researcher, who then, of course, feeds it back to the client. So that's something that's very common for us. It's a very easy thing for us to implement. In the very near term, some of the like what do you call it? Some of the the painting is very higher ed, right? So we're organized around a section in a semester with a professor, right? We sort of retrofit that to meet the corporate need, where it's it's a group within instead of a section, or within a course. So there's just a little bit of that. We're working to make it more sensible from a labeling standpoint for our corporate clients. But the core of what we do, it's almost like when people go through those drug trials and they're like, oh my God, this thing is working so well, we got to stop the trial and give everybody the drug, right? Like that's what we're seeing with our tool, where it's like, okay, it might not be perfect right now, but what it is so much better. The information I'm getting is so much better. Like, okay, just the fact that it's not packaged in a way that's like super simple doesn't really matter to people that much. And we're getting there. I'd say within 3 to 6 months, we're going to be there on that front anyway. So yeah, I think public sector, I think corporate and employee engagement, I think is really powerful. And it's really anywhere you feel communication is important, which is candidly everywhere. Right?
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, all of us can improve our communications, and it wouldn't matter whether we're in the private sector, we're in state and local government, we're in federal government, you're in higher ed. I think the way that you've done some of the research and understood how people want to communicate, how they want to learn, how they want to share, and how we can best use AI to extract that in a more timely manner to make us smarter, faster, is really the key here. If people want to learn more about Breakout Learning, where would they go?
They can go to breakoutlearning.com. So we've got some nice videos on there. But I would ask them to reach out directly to me. I'm at rv@breakoutlearning.com. I'm super focused on this directly as the CEO, I think, and the co-founder. I think people are often surprised by the speed at which we can build and the responsiveness that we have. And so even for fairly what might seem like unique use cases or needs, we can be incredibly responsive. And that's how, frankly, that's how we build our business. The more individual use cases we see, I've found this in every business I've built. By the third or fourth one, you realize what the commonalities are, and that's the one that everybody wants. And so, that's how we do it.
Love it. Well, I think that many people will want to reach out, rv@breakoutlearning.com, reach out to Ramit directly, as well as go to their website. We really appreciate you taking the time to share kind of this newer concept, a new way of learning while leveraging AI, and at the same point, just communicating better, right? More transparent communications, more useful communications that help drive and move organizations in the right way.
Amazing. Guys, thanks so much for the time and the exposure. I really appreciate it, TJand James. It's a pleasure to be here, and hopefully we'll be spending more time together as we do some business together.
You
Sounds
bet.
good. We'll do it.
Thanks, Ron.